Hey World History peeps, welcome to the last content video of the year. This is Key Concept 9, and there's going to be a lot of stuff all over the place, so bear with me because I do have some videos and some stuff, but there might be some topics to explain so you understand the gravity or the weight of some of these inventions, which we take for granted. So the first one is almost all about that kind of stuff because we're going straight to, oh great, I didn't set the Prezi right, here we go. Globalization and a globalized world. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the advancements. So all kinds of things have changed our lives and changed history, not only just the last 100 years, the last 50 years, or even the last 25, and how much the world has changed. So one of the first things was just wireless communication, such as the radio. You got to think about in 1900, all right, best way of communication was by letter or walking. Internally, if companies wanted to move, they actually had tubes. They had vacuum tubes that could, like, just like at the bank where you had those little things that come over, those things would be everywhere inside an office building. That's probably the fastest way of communication. And of course, it's very limited by how close you are. The other fastest way would probably be by train or telegraph, which was still wired and it still required Morse code. But other than that, that was also expensive. So there wasn't really anything there. By the 1930s, with wireless technology and the radio, you could broadcast signals. It wasn't until World War II that we kind of had the two-way radio where it was a signal-to-signal connection. But even then, what that led to and what that developed to cellular technology and using satellites. You could make a phone call anywhere in the world. And for you all, I know I'm not trying to get an old man Johnson about what in my day and stuff, but like if I had a telephone, I could call someone long distance, but that still would cost a lot of money. Even the early days of cell phones, there was long distance charges. Fun fact, I had a May term, which is basically like a 4 to 5 week course, and I took it in University of Minnesota. And I had my cell phone, and I was calling my girlfriend, and it was actually at the time I was thinking about maybe I should marry this chick. But anyway, we talked a lot from Minnesota to Virginia. Yeah, that bill for my phone, no data. This was before I even had a smartphone, okay? So there was no data plan or anything. It was just phone calls, and not even text messaging. And through all of that, I got a cell phone bill for $400 because we talk so much. So even then, that's how things were developing. But the internet too, having technology and stuff connected to you quickly, easily, and accessible, and now all in your hands. I don't know how to put that on a scale of something you would understand as a big deal. You guys are so used to it. Beforehand, what would you do? I would ask your parents. I know, but hey, it might get them off your back about asking about the end of the year stuff, or what are you doing about this, or what's your summer plans like. Just ask them like, hey, what was it like without cell phones? Like, what were some inconveniences that you remember or now seem inconvenient? Because the world does change and get closer together. You can collaborate worldwide. We can share connections and play computer games. I've met people playing, World of Warcraft. I've met people from Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, Malaysia, Singapore, Japan, South Korea, Australia. One of my friends is actually in Hobart, Tasmania, so it's fun to talk to him about some of that stuff. But all over the world at the same time, and with such low latency that we could play a computer game together and there's really little lag. So that's how quickly communication changed. And then transportation, airline travel. One of the theories to the AIDS epidemic, which we'll talk about in a second, has been that it's been spread by airline stewards and pilots as they traveled around, that there was a small virus that was affecting small villages. I believe one of the theories is in Poland. And then all of a sudden, it's spreading all over the world based on major city traffic. And so one of the theories is a patient zero or typhoid Mary type contracted it while in a Germany or Poland and spread through airline travel. The other one that we really don't understand how significant this was the shipping container. I mean, early age, you had chests and you had barrels, and that was your storage. But it wasn't until the late 1950s, early 60s, they developed a standardized shipping container that can be transported by boat to a rail yard, from a rail yard to a truck, all around, and categorized and planned how where each thing goes. So because of that, the distance to transport goods was greatly reduced. And one of the main reasons why all of our stuff is made overseas now, because shipping is that much cheaper.
Container shipping moves 95% of all manufactured goods around the world. In 2017, more than $4 trillion worth of products were sent over the oceans. It's an industry that underpins the global economy. But it wasn't always as big or as efficient as it is today. The idea of shipping started in 3rd century BC, when merchants realized that sending products overseas was cheaper and faster than by land. Early on, goods were loaded onto ships in sacks, barrels, and wooden crates with scores of dock workers squeezing them on decks or in tight spaces below. Ships often spent more time at ports than sailing, and not much changed until 1956. That's when American truck driver Malcolm McLean stacked 58 metal boxes on a ship going from New Jersey to Houston. This idea completely revolutionized the industry. The containers not only protected the products, but when the ships docked at ports, truck beds and freight trains could take them away without repackaging. A flurry of innovation followed, and container sizes were standardized. In 1966, Moore McCormick Line started the first transatlantic container service, and then in 1968, one of the first modern container ships hit the water. The Japanese Hakone Maru carried 752 20-foot containers using a standard still used today. Cargo could now be moved from purpose-built vessels to rail and roads in massive volumes, cutting transport costs by at least 75%. This led to the emergence of global shipping behemoths like Denmark's Maersk Line, France's CMA CGM, and China's COSCO. By the 1980s, around 90% of manufactured goods were containerized, from designer dresses and food to home goods, electronics, and heavy machinery. Globalization exploded as ships moved Asian goods to the West and vice versa, making stops at dozens of ports along the way. Recently, the Panama and Suez Canals were expanded, allowing for bigger ships to cross and in greater numbers. But it's not all been smooth sailing. The industry has been plagued by too many ships in the water, sparking a series of price wars that plunged many operators deep into the red and completely sank others. This caused a wave of consolidation, seeing the top 20 ocean carriers shrink to 11, a number that's expected to get even smaller. Shipping has also seen criticism from governments and environmentalists, who say that it's responsible for around a quarter of the world's nitrogen oxide pollution. In response, operators are adopting cleaner fuels like natural gas. Today, the industry continues to boom. Container ships are as high as the Empire State Building if turned upright and can move more than 20,000 boxes each. A single container can hold 10,000 iPads at a cost of 5 cents each from Shanghai to Hamburg. The average TV coming to the US from China costs less than $2 to ship. The most recent growth has been in refrigerated shipping. Fresh produce, food, and flowers that once only moved by plane are now shipped on satellite-tracked reefer boxes that keep them fresh. Bananas can last in these for up to 50 days. So what does the future hold? Likely crewless behemoths running on batteries that can move 50,000 containers, and global cargo distributed through blockchain technology that will eliminate paperwork and further cut costs. Later this year, the first so-called Tesla of the Seas will hit the water in a Norwegian fjord, moving fertilizer from a production site to an export port. The ship will replace thousands of truck routes through populated areas.
Other developments, the development of oil as a way of getting energy in the early days, motors as well as oil power, but then also using nuclear power, splitting the atom to generate a lot of heat that basically, once again, as John Green said, still just pushes a steam engine, just like Lake Anna. But all of that with extra power, you could have more power using technology. And because of that power using technology, you can make more stuff. One example too is bauxite, aluminum, is really heavy on its intensive energy use. Iceland is 100% geothermal power. They're producing more power than they need, and it's hard to export it being on an isolated island like that. So what have they done? They've turned to aluminum processing because they have such abundant energy and it's so cheap that they could transport aluminum or bauxite and then refine it into aluminum and export the aluminum. So other technologies that really change the world, the more effective uses of birth, or more effective ways to control birth or birth control. So what this does with more effective forms of birth control is women can control when they have children. They can delay childbearing years if they don't want to have kids earlier in their lives. And what does that do? It opens up more opportunities economically because they don't have to rely or be the only caregiver of children. They can delay when they have kids so that they can establish themselves more viably economically. And because of that, you see less kids being born, more women able to hold career level jobs, go to college. One way to look at that, though, is women have to be concerned about whether or not they're pregnant, and all of the stresses on their bodies as well as their futures that a pregnancy and having a child can be. Being able to delay that or control when that happens to them completely changes their own lives. They have more control over their own bodies, and that control leads to them making choices, more informed decisions about when and what they're going to do with their childbearing years. So it changes everything, and also drops fertility rates with less kids being born. Additionally, at the same time all of this is going on, we're developing new ways of fertilizer, pesticides, and genetically modified organisms. So the Green Revolution, that's that picture, right? I gotta figure it out. Right? Nope. Right there. Yep. So that you can grow plants that can resist pesticides that normally would kill them because of this. And then finally, of course, medical developments such as vaccines and antibiotics. Penicillin alone probably was one of the major factors of winning World War II. I mean, we look at all the things that really developed and made us win World War II, and most of the time we're like, yeah, our army. And yes, we did fight. However, for every one person in the field, there were 10 people behind in supply. Our supply systems is what will change the world. But not only that, it was our supply, it was our development of synthetic rubber, as well as our development of penicillin to treat infections, which would be common if you think about wartime injuries.
London, 1928. A group of mold spores surf a breeze through a lab. They drift onto a petri dish, and when they land, they germinate a medical revolution. This lab belongs to Alexander Fleming, a Scottish scientist investigating the properties of infectious bacteria. At this time, Fleming is away on vacation. When he returns, he finds a colony of mold growing on a petri dish he'd forgotten to place in his incubator. And around this colony of mold is a zone completely and unexpectedly clear of bacteria. In studying this mysterious phenomenon, Fleming came to realize that the mold was secreting some kind of compound that was killing the bacteria. The mold was a species in the Penicillium genus, so Fleming dubbed the antibacterial compound penicillin. What Fleming stumbled upon was a microbial defense system. The Penicillium mold constantly produces penicillin in order to defend itself from threats, such as nearby bacterial colonies that might consume its resources. Penicillin destroys many types of bacteria by disrupting synthesis of their cell walls. These walls get their strength from a thick protective mesh of sugars and amino acids that are constantly being broken down and rebuilt. Penicillin binds to one of the compounds that weaves this mesh together and prevents the wall from being reconstructed at a critical phase. Meanwhile, Penicillin stimulates the release of highly reactive molecules that cause additional damage. Eventually, the cell's structure breaks down completely. This two-pronged attack is lethal to a wide range of bacteria, whether in petri dishes, our bodies, or elsewhere. It's not, however, harmful to our own cells, because those don't have cell walls. For a decade or so after Fleming's discovery, penicillin remained a laboratory curiosity. But during World War II, researchers figured out how to isolate the active compound and grow the mold in larger quantities. They then went on to win the Nobel Prize for their work. Teams at Oxford and several American drug companies continued development, and within a few years it was commercially available. Penicillin and similar compounds quickly transformed the treatment of infections. For the time being, they remain some of the most important life-saving antibiotics used in medicine. However, the more we use any antibiotic, the more bacteria evolve resistance to it. In the case of penicillin, some bacteria produce compounds that can break down the key structure that interferes with cell wall synthesis. As antibiotic use has increased, more and more bacteria have evolved this defense, making these antibiotics ineffective against a growing number of bacterial infections. This means it's essential that doctors not overprescribe the drug. Meanwhile, 5 to 15% of patients in developed countries self-identify as allergic to penicillin, making it the most commonly reported drug allergy. However, the vast majority, over 90% of people who think they're allergic to penicillin actually are not. Why the misperception? Many patients acquire the allergy label as children, when a rash appears after they're treated for an infection with penicillin or closely related drugs. The rash is often blamed on penicillin, while the more likely culprit is the original infection, or a reaction between the infection and the antibiotic. However, genuine penicillin allergies, where our immune systems mistake penicillin for an attacker, do occur rarely and can be very dangerous. So if you think you're allergic but don't know for sure, your best bet is to visit an allergist. They'll complete an evaluation that'll confirm whether or not you have the allergy. Even if you do have a penicillin allergy, your immune cells that react to the drug may lose their ability to recognize it. In fact, about 80% of people who are allergic to penicillin outgrow their allergy within 10 years. This is great news for people who currently identify as allergic to penicillin. The drug may one day save their lives, as it has done for so many others. How does medicine know where it needs to go? Follow its journey through the body with this video.
So, all of these advances really culminate early or by the mid-20th century, and then go on to all kinds of new things just thereafter. So, tech advances and limitations after 1900. One thing to keep in mind, whenever the world gets more and more interconnected, these new connections produce some bad responses. When the world gets more connected, say, thanks to the Mongols, you had the bubonic plague that spread throughout Eurasia. When you had European contact with Native Americans in the Americas, you had another exchange of diseases, killing off roughly about 75 to 90% of all Native Americans. Now, with World War I, interconnecting the world in such a quick and fast supply chain, all towards supplying the home front of World War I, or rather the front and the actual battles, you have a more interconnected world, and the Spanish flu will go around the world. And to show you just how much what the Spanish flu did, I got a little presentation for you. So my dad has done a lot of Ancestry.com stuff, so here's my family tree and all the research he's done. So that, I don't know why I have my 4th grade picture in there, or 6th grade, I can't remember. Those years are blurry, but that's the one that's in there for me on Ancestry.com. My wife, there's my dad, and then his father and my grandmother. But then this is the point I'm talked about the Spanish flu. James Johnson, my great-grandfather, had a first wife, and she died in November of 1918 in Baltimore during the epidemic. Baltimore is one of the worst cities hit after Philadelphia. So she died, late October. And the reason why that matters is because James Johnson's mother, where is she? Oh, here we go. Marion Taylor, she died a few weeks later in 1918 to the epidemic. On top of that, his second wife's first husband also died as a result of the flu. And they met shortly after 1918, and my grandfather was born within a year of their marriage. So just as a random, and I look at all my other family tree lines and whatnot, and there's very little information or showing 1918. It's really just those three, and I've done the research to show how much the flu could have impacted people, including in my own personal life, and then technically, because I'm your teacher, it affected you too. I know, cheesy stuff, but it's still something about actual history that happened to us. So, with all of these diseases, we have, influenza we talked about, but also the Ebola virus that's spread and dangerous, as well as the human immunodeficiency virus, which leads to the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, AIDS, which is a major epidemic now still in parts of Africa, and it's still around here as well. So it's prevalent. There's ways to treat it with medicine, but there is no cure for this disease just yet. Other diseases still persist that are associated with poverty. The amount of stagnant water leads to more mosquitoes, which means malaria is still a major problem in impoverished areas. Tuberculosis is also an easily treatable but also highly infectious disease, and so lack of medicine or lack of sanitation will lead to that, as well as cholera, which is a disease that comes from infected water, and it's pretty nasty. I kind of don't want to get into the details of how gross it is, but basically, I said I didn't want to, but I'm going to tell you, you purge everything that's liquid from your body, out of your body anyway, can come out. So throwing up, diarrhea as well. And you generally die of dehydration if you don't treat it properly and get enough water, which could still be infected. But we're also showing up new diseases are popping up as we age, because as humans are getting older and older, diseases that are associated with old age are now popping up as major the things that cause the most deaths. So heart disease, as well as deteriorating brain condition of Alzheimer's. So as our technology gets more and more advanced, there's still some limits to our globalized world, and obviously bringing up the coronavirus, but also ones like SARS, which was one of the earlier ones too that we were worried about. But those two show us the interconnectivity of our world. So, more advances and advancements, debates about the environment. Sorry, I messed this up, but we're doing it anyway. So it's tech advancements, debates about the environment. First off is about human activity. Deforestation caused, obviously, shutting down trees, but we need to realize it's not just because they want paper or wood for their houses. It's for farming, for intensive agriculture that will ruin the environment that it's in, and they'll move on, and it's called shifting cultivation. Most of these practices are quite detrimental to the environment and destroy habitats. Secondly, desertification in the same way. When we farm marginal areas, we cut down plants and trees and whatnot that can harbor and hold on to some of the moisture. But by cutting them down and growing crops, we then supply more water to the crops. When we harvest them, that water stays with the plants, and there's very little that comes there. And with the erosion of roots and stuff like that, you've got growing and increasing deserts and drier areas. There's a conflict over fresh water. One of the major concerns coming up right now is, what do we do with the Nile? And it's not us, of course, the United States, but Ethiopia and Egypt have, or are going to, or have had a lot of conflict about how much water comes in from the Blue Nile, I think it is, the northern one in Ethiopia, whereas White Nile's from Sudan. And the reason for that is Egypt very much controls and monitors how much water is coming from the Nile. And yet, with Ethiopia developing too, they want to use and harness some of the Nile's power with electricity, hydroelectricity, as well as using the water for drinking. And so it's causing tensions about who has those rights to the water. We are competing for more and more resources, not to mention we consume more resources than ever before. When you look at how much number of Earths needed if everyone used renewable resources at the same rate as these individual countries. So, how much resources would we need if everyone used the same? So if everyone consumed the same amount as the United States globally, we would need 5 times more resources out there. For the UK, it's 2.8, China 2.1, but it's showing you the level of consumption of the Earth's resources by countries and not necessarily equal globally. And then finally, the concerns over greenhouse gases and pollutants, and has caused a debate over our role with nature and how do we be curators of Earth, as well as how does climate change happen and who causes it. So for this video, I won't get into the general prevailing theories of science right now. I'll stick to my history. So cool, moving on. All right, economics in a global age. So after the Cold War, there was a big push towards free markets, meaning limited tariffs, limited taxes on goods being transported back and forth. This has caused both good and bad for the countries involved. The champions of these movements, Reagan in the United States, Margaret Thatcher in the United Kingdom, even though they both predate the Cold War, or the end of the Cold War. China under Deng Xiaoping, and then Chile under Pinochet, these letting businesses run themselves, generate their economy, jobs and whatnot. One example, though, where these things can turn in a way that wasn't expected is, for example, NAFTA. And while we think the free trade is perfectly great for us, what it's done to Mexico has been pretty damaging, as cheaper American goods can now enter the markets of Mexico without taxes or on those imports. And so American goods are being sold cheaper than Mexican goods, and it's been putting Mexican companies out of business, leaving more people unemployed and seeking jobs elsewhere, particularly in the United States. One such narrow area is corn production. The United States subsidizes corn, so we don't actually sell corn at market value. The United States subsidizes those farmers to grow as much corn as possible, and we subsidize it to a bare minimum, or the market level. What that does then is it devalues corn at a very low rate, so those that were growing corn in other countries, particularly in Mexico, can't make a living off of corn like they have. Poor Mexicans, where do they go? They look to a more prosperous country with more job opportunities. They go to the United States. And so that's one reason for some of these changes in our demographics and in immigration is a lot to do with economics. Revolutions in communication and technology have let us grow knowledge-based economies. Japan, with very little resources of itself, has developed their people into producing all kinds of cool tech. I mean, you're going to see those like videos and stuff of Japanese technology, and there's all kinds of cool little things that are out there now. But Finland, they're the country that invented the cell phone, or not the cell phone, sorry, text messaging. And the story I heard, and I thought it was from The World is Flat, but Nokia was going to different places and trying to think of what's the next thing we do on cell phones. And they asked 6th graders, and they said, why can't we send messages? And Nokia's like, what? That's a really good idea. Let's make that happen. And a population of a couple million, like 3 million people, sent over 2 billion text messages the first year it goes live. And that's text. So the United States is also known for their high tech, particularly in computers, as well as aerospace engineering, as we get more and more prepped up and seeing the contracts coming out of NASA and SpaceX. So woohoo, yeah, I like that stuff. So Asian production and manufacturing has increased, particularly countries like Vietnam and Bangladesh. Unfortunately, at some costs, and I'll show you a video in just a second.
It was the worst industrial disaster in Bangladesh's history, and Rana Plaza today is little more than rubble. Rebuilding lives is taking time too. Meet Nazma, pregnant when she lost her husband and her livelihood. Compensation has started to arrive, but it's not enough to support her small family.
I'm very scared. I'm even scared to do any job, and I don't want to go to any garment factory. I don't want to work anywhere like it. Another factory will collapse like Rana Plaza.
The International Labour Organization calculates it needs £24 million to properly provide for the victims of Rana Plaza. 1 year on, and the trust fund has only £4 million in the bank ready to spend. Another £5 million is on its way, but that's less than half the target amount raised. And most of the money has come from just one donor, Primark, which has pledged £6 million.
Why are the other brands taking so long? When they were sourcing out from these companies in Bangladesh, they didn't seem to have a problem. When they were making the profit, they didn't seem to have a problem. Now that the workers have suffered such a tragedy, why are they dragging their feet?
Take a look at the labels next time you go shopping and you'll realise that more and more of the clothes we buy are made in Bangladesh. In the case of Primark here, it's around about 10% of everything that's on sale. Now, the trade union Industrial says there were 28 companies sourcing from Rana Plaza. Just over half of them, though, have failed to contribute anything to the fund. The minimum wage in Bangladesh has risen to £40 a month, but this fair trade fashion company says its staff there earn almost twice that sum.
Unfortunately, the increase is still not enough. It doesn't really represent a living wage, especially to people who are living in Dhaka, in the urban areas where living is incredibly expensive.
Last year, an undercover ITV investigation found evidence that other clothing factories in Bangladesh were unsafe. Inspections at 3,500 are finally underway in an attempt to ensure that another disaster on the scale of Rana Plaza is unthinkable. Joel Hills, ITV News.
In Latin America, Mexico and Honduras have increased their industrial output as well. Now, free market economies and multinational corporations and regional trade agreements have also increased. So trade agreements like the World Trade Organization, the North American Free Trade Agreement, and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, Asian, so NAFTA, Asian, for example, also the EU. But there's also multinational corporations that are headquarters in one place but have many, many businesses, factories, and locations around the world, like Nestle, Nissan, Mahindra and Mahindra, which is an Indian company. So the world, once again, more things are becoming closer and more interconnected. So calls for reform and responses. So first, some of the major changes of the 20th century from this globalization output is to look at rights-based discourse, basically people producing and explaining that everyone should have rights, challenged old assumptions about race, class, gender, and religion. One of the biggest stickling points during World War II was in World War I, the League of Nations Charter was proposed to have a section that said all races on Earth are equal. One of the signing members, or proposed signing members, refused outright to sign it, and that was Woodrow Wilson of the United States. And that greatly embittered Japan about that kind of slight. So, but the UN Declaration of Rights in 1948, I believe, 46, promoted an understanding that everybody, every human being has basic living standards that should be followed, which, now this sounds like who knew that they were there, but it's really the first time putting on paper who gets these rights, particularly women and children, as well as refugees, that people should be treated as a basic standard of humanity, no matter who they are or where they are. And that's something we're still trying to deal with even today. Women's rights, including voting rights, particularly suffrage given in the United States in 1920, Brazil 1932, Turkey 1934, Japan 1945, India in 1947, and Morocco in 1963, to give you a scale of most of these countries are adapting, but it's not as quick or easy as thought. As well as women can hold office. You see increased female literacy and increased numbers of higher education of women. And now in the United States, I believe it's still something like 60-40 more women than men go to college. The U.S. Civil Rights Act of 1965, which brought a lot of regulation towards discrimination or against it. The end of apartheid in South Africa. And then what's called caste reservation in India. And caste reservation, the best way we can put it for our own, is kind of like an affirmative action where the either the tribes or the castes, the better castes, would get certain jobs because they're also fewer, and then other castes would get their section, and then those that are in poverty. And so this is how they would want to have quotas for certain jobs or business, and then 40% still on merit. And there's a lot of protesting by different groups in India saying this is, of course, getting rid of complete meritocracy, or the best are not getting the best jobs. But at the same point, how do you elevate people of a lower status if you don't give them the opportunities to have those status to then produce people that can do those jobs and blah, blah, blah. So that's their same take. But notice here the female literacy gap is still declining, which is good. The literacy gap is the difference between men and women in their ability to read and write. So obviously by region and stuff it changes, but it's all going down, which is good. Culture time. Oh, sorry, last bit. Movements protesting the inequality of environment and economic consequences of globalization, because global integration still leads to haves and have-nots. I am not able to invest worldwide in different countries, though that's slowly changing thanks to apps like Robinhood and other small trading stuff I can still, and there's ways I can give microloans. But I don't have the same tap into resources as other places, and some people who don't have a phone don't have any of that to do. So there still is some gross economic inequalities, not to mention that if you're a grower of a certain product, you're at the whim of the market, and that will generally bring your price down, which means you're not at a level that you can support. That's where a company or an organization called World Fair Trade Organization, and if you see stuff that says Fair Trade Certified, that's looking at people getting paid a fair wage for them to live on. So yes, it's going to be more expensive, but at the same point, you're encouraging these people then to grow their farms in a much more sustainable way at a profitable way for them as well. Environment.
A supermarket. Here we buy almost everything we need in our day-to-day lives. Our decisions on what to buy are based on taste, quality, and price. But what you might not know is that the decisions we make can have a significant impact. Fair trade products vastly improve the working and living conditions of families in developing countries. But how does fair trade even work? Let's take this pack of coffee as an example. Coffee is one of the most important agricultural products on the global market. And it goes on a long journey before it ends up on our store shelves. For the over 30 million coffee farmers around the world, the coffee we buy means a lot of hard work. At the same time, they earn very little money from it. This is due to speculation in financial markets and little to no influence on the pricing of the product, as well as unstable yields caused by changes in temperature and climate. Coffee farmers are powerless in the face of the free market. Fair trade seeks to change that. Fair trade coffee farmers don't work alone. They are members of cooperatives and organized democratically. There are many advantages to this system. The farmers know the true value of their product, which makes it far easier for them to negotiate prices. They have access to credit and are able to learn from each other through a constant exchange of information. A central component of the fair trade system is the minimum price, which is the minimum that farmers' organizations are paid when selling their products through fair trade. Additionally, producer organizations receive the Fair Trade Premium. It is up to the farmers and workers to decide how to use the premium. They might build wells and hospitals, buy better farming equipment, or invest in switching to organic farming. Having a stable income can drastically improve a whole family's opportunities. At the same time, it minimizes the risk of exploitative child labor. The environment benefits from fair trade too. Preserving natural habitats and the climate are key aspects of fair trade. The use of genetically modified organisms is forbidden, and water is used as sparingly as possible. The fair trade standards are the requirements that producers and the businesses who buy their goods have to follow. They are developed by Fair Trade International in consultation with producers, businesses, and all members of the fair trade system. Fair trade producers have a 50% say in all key decisions made. Our independent certification body, FlowCert, checks and monitors that the fair trade standards are being met. Now, back to our pack of coffee. After being harvested and dried, the beans are transported to processors, who roast, prepare, and repackage the coffee for sale. Coffee is the most well-known fair trade product. However, there is a huge range of fair trade products available, from bananas, ice cream, rice, cocoa, sugar, herbs, honey, dried fruits and nuts, to fruit juices, tea and wine. Even flowers, cotton, and sports balls can be fair trade certified. There are over 30,000 fair trade products on sale in more than 125 countries worldwide, in supermarkets, cafes, restaurants, and even trains and planes. So now, it's over to you. In your daily shopping, look for the Fair Trade mark and choose products that change lives for over 1.5 million farmers and workers worldwide. Fair Trade. The power is in your hands.
Environmental, including the Greenbelt movement, which first started as kind of like a silly idea, was to plant trees across a width of Africa. And they would just they'd have planes just dropping fertilized tree seeds to help stop the growth of desertification. And a lot of proponents or opponents said this wasn't going to work. This is a stupid, foolhardy waste of money. What they found was, even still, I don't know if it was as small as 1 in 10 trees planted grew, or 1 in 4, but what they started seeing is it kind of worked. It actually was creating a wall of trees throughout that southern area of Africa, the Sahara area, and so it's starting to show more promise.
I think that it is very, very important to continue encouraging our governments and ourselves that the environment is not really an issue for tomorrow. The environment is everyday issue. It's the air we breathe, it's the water we drink, it's the food we eat, and we can't live without these things. For me, the biggest challenge is governance, because the people at the top have power. Because they have power, they have control of resources, they have a lot of privileges, and they can continue to increase these privileges from where they sit. And the public at the grassroots can continue to suffer. I could see that the top is very heavy, and changing the top is very, very difficult. And changing the top, if you don't have the grassroots, is almost impossible. So what we did in the Greenbelt movement was to go to those grassroots, those bottom, and instead of trickling down, go to them and say, maybe should be a trickle up. The entry point is the tree. A tree has a personality, and as it grows and changes the landscape, it also seems to change the minds of the people, and it brings with it a certain rapport that actually encourages people to do more, so that you start with a few farmers, and before you know, so many other farmers want to also participate.
Na the green volunteer ne ndeithagĩrĩria atumia ku form groups na kũmonia ũrĩa tree nursery ĩformagwo. Nĩ twĩkĩrĩte maratathi tĩri rĩu na tũkawota mbegũ icio tũgaciĩkĩra maĩ, at the same time nĩ tũrekĩra maratathi tĩri na kũmabanga ũrĩa tũkũ transplant seedlings.
This area, before conservation, it was very much degraded. You can see now the seedlings that the trees that we have planted. In the whole of this area, we have planted about 1 million seedlings. Before we came in, people used to cut trees, even the small ones that were there. So with this kind of slope, the erosion was very severe. Now you can see the change. The area looks green. It is very green. Look at the river, it's clean because there's no erosion. So the community will have clean water.
I have always seen poverty as having two sides to it. Poverty will cause environmental degradation because, as I sometimes do, a poor person will cut their last tree to cook what may be their last meal. They're not worried about tomorrow. They're worried about today. On the other hand, it is very important for poor people to understand that the more you the more you degrade your environment, the more you mismanage your environment, the more you are likely to dig yourself deeper into poverty.
Nĩ hakinyĩte handũ kĩrĩma nĩ ũndũ wa gũthũkangio mũno, maĩ magatuĩka rĩu matingiuma na kũu thĩ, koguo karũĩ nĩ gatuĩkĩte nĩ gegũthira. No kuma rĩrĩa tuonire ũguo na tũkĩambĩrĩria kũhanda mĩtĩ mwaka wa 2000 nĩ tuonete improvement na mũno makĩria maĩ nĩ mambatĩrire na hinya mũno nginya atĩ ona nĩ kapindaga makĩria ma andũ 5,000 around na hatirĩ rũĩ rũngĩ rũkoretwo rĩu rũgĩikara ta ũrĩa Kadima ĩikarĩte.
Now, because we were dealing with the poor people, we also wanted to give them an income. But we were keen not to be seen as coming with a bowl of money to give, a bag of money to give away. So we said, you plant the tree. If you make it survive, we will give you a token of appreciation. And I emphasize that because you can't pay for all that work. We didn't have that kind of money. They can actually make enough money which they can invest. And we encourage them to invest in income generating activities. So, because in many ways you are trying to improve the quality of life.
Ya kuhanda mĩtĩ henjezi-inĩ cia mũgũnda ĩno ya graveria wambere mbegũ nĩ cionekaga na ihenya. Through this nĩ tũthondekete mbeca cia mbaũ more than 100 kĩmũciĩ wakorwo ũtarĩ na strain ya mũtũrĩre. Operate nĩ magĩũcokete magoka makarehe ithomo ici ingĩ cia magatuhe a kind of loan magatu supply na mĩatũ nĩgetha twarĩkia kũiga tũkĩrĩ tũgacoka tũkendia ũkĩ rĩu income ĩyo yũkaga gĩcunjĩ-inĩ. Mbũri ici nĩ ibreedĩtwo kuma Germany, koguo nĩ irĩ iria rĩingĩ na nĩ resistant na mĩrimũ tondũ koguo twa investire mbeca harĩ mbũri ĩrĩa twambĩrĩirie nayo na nĩ hotete kũrehe mbeca nyingĩ mũno makĩria kuma 1996 rĩrĩa twaingĩrire group-inĩ ya mbũri. Out of mbeca iria twaheanĩte ikahanda mĩtĩ twareherwo tũkĩgũra mbũri.
To work with the communities, you need passion. You need to really want to do that, because otherwise they can be a nuisance and you can be in a hurry because you want them to change like yesterday. Quite often we get people who are educated, they have big ideas, but they want these people to change overnight. They can't. And if you push them too much, they will do it while you are there, and once you pull back, they collapse. So it's always good to hear that there is somebody somewhere, we are no longer in touch, and this person is still going on with their project. They are now able to stand on their own. They can truly say they have improved their quality of life. And it all started with planting that one tree.
Greenpeace is against the destruction of the environment in all forms and will protest or get in the way of things as well to further expose how bad this is to the environment. So, culture after 1900. Fun stuff. So, popular culture and consumer culture becomes more global. All kinds of cool stuff comes about. You have one example I'm going to show you, just because this is going to have fun with culture, but This Time for Africa by Shakira. Colombian woman who predominantly started singing in Spanish, who marries, of course, a Spanish soccer player, sings in English about South African World Cup. I mean, that's an example of globalization right there, and a worldwide appeal to all of this. Reggae has an international appeal, but other things, by the way, that top right here above me, this is a heat map of Michael Jackson sales globally. He's still popular. He's still very much popular around the world. But you have obviously like Facebook and Twitter. You have the BBC that has multiple channels and multiple media productions as well. And then the World Cup and the Olympics. I'm going to show you a couple clips of famous moments in the Olympics, at least for Americans in America.
Able to get a piece of it to sweep it away. 28 seconds. The crowd going insane. Carlemon shooting it into the American end again. Morrow is back there. Now Johnson, 19 seconds. Johnson over to Ramsey. Villalekhanov gets checked by Ramsey. McClanahan is there. The puck is still loose. 11 seconds. You've got 10 seconds. The countdown going on right now. Morrow up to Schultz. 5 seconds left in the game. Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
right now preparing for the race in which he is the favorite. Like the man who won the 100 meters, he is from the Ukraine. In lane 2, we're going to have Dieter Fromm of East Germany, another very strong runner. In lane 3, Dave Waddle with the golf cap from the United States. Next to him in lane 4, Robert Uko of Kenya. All of these men could win the gold medal. Then we have Andy Carter of Great Britain. He also a very strong runner. Franz Josef Kepler, the veteran from West Germany on home ground. And Mike Boyk, the surprise from Kenya. And on the outside, we have Kupchik the Pole, 2 laps around. They run in lanes for the first 100 meters, and then they'll break. Boyd is looking strong again at the moment already. On the inside, we have Arjanov. Arjanov in the lead as they break, but Boyd on the outside is going for the lead right now. Uko, the other Kenyan, on the inside, and Waddle is way back exactly where he was in the semifinals.
We don't know right now whether he's just trying to stay out of trouble. It'll be a few more 100 yards before we know if Dave is seriously injured or really just lagging back to stay out of trouble. He's not too bad because it was quite a fast pace through that first 200 meters. And as we said, here go the Kenyans charging for the lead, coming up to the bell lap, Boyd and Uku.
Okay, and right with him is Andy Carter of Great Britain, Dieter Fromm of East Germany. Those are the 4 right now. They're on the bell lap. The split is 52.3.
If Dave could just pull up here and get on the outside of Arzanov, he would have him boxed in perfectly. Let's hope Dave makes a move down this back stretch.
The Kenyans running like a mirror reflection of each other in first and second.
There he goes.
There with him.
There's Arzanov from the Soviet Union going up to the lead now.
There goes Arzanov, the favorite, taking the lead. Dave Waddle is making his bid. He's not in too bad position right now.
I think Dave's in great position on this. At this point, he's in perfect position on the outside. Good striking distance for this last 100, 200 meters.
Stand by for the kick of Dave Waddle. If he's got it, he could make it. But he's got to catch Arzanov and the Kenyans. And here he comes. This is the bid for a gold medal of Dave Waddle. He's got one Kenyan.
I think he's going to get it.
Make it. I think he did it. Dave Waddle won the gold medal. The man who came out of nowhere in the U.S. Olympic trials. The man who then got married, and some people said he should have gotten married. It was going to ruin him. He came up with 2 bad knees. He couldn't train for weeks. And he has come in and won the gold medal, the first tremendously exciting moment in track for the United States in these Olympic Games. And Dave looked the calmest of all.
And the World Cup, I'll show you one in a sec too.
Maradona puede tocar para Enrique, siempre Maradona es un drible, se va entre 3, siempre Diego, genial, 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 tocó para Valdano, entró Maradona, falta entonces importancia, vamos, ¡gol! ¡Gol!
But arts, entertainment, and pop culture reflecting a globalized world. Now, because of this too, we have consumer culture being globalized and transcending national borders, of products being purchased from one place to another. You know, online commerce. I don't know if most of you have heard of Alibaba, but Alibaba is it's another kind of, it's not like Amazon in the same place. They sell you bulk goods or knockoff goods, or basically goods that are manufactured in China direct from the manufacturers, not necessarily resale or changed up in Amazon as finished products. That's eBay, user to user. You have global brands like Toyota or, you know, Coca-Cola. Do you need that video again? No, I didn't think so. All right. So you see this world changing. Oh, and by the way, this guy right here, that's just one example. If you think about the music style, it's hip hop from Germany. Hip hop's super popular in Germany, and so different genres and different music and whatnot transcend borders is great ideas. Let's go with it. So that's a globalized world. Now, resistance to globalization, because there are groups that are against this. One example is resistance taking all types of forms. You see people protesting IMF and the International Monetary Fund, as well as World Bank. And some of their reasons vary, not necessarily always saying that it's globalization they're against. It's that these practices by some of these banks. One of the really cool books that I would recommend for those of you into like modern history and why some people might not like the United States is there's a book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. This guy's job for the World Bank was to go to companies, or countries rather, and inflate their projected output. So you take a loan from us, dude, your GDP is going to go up 10% a year. GDP going over 4% growth every year is amazing. So they would promise things like 6 to 7, 10% growth, and if they took these loans and invested. And so these countries with these dictators would take these loans and never be able to repay them because the economy does not work like that, and it does not grow as fast as projected. And so these countries go into debt, and then they can't provide for as much and even less, and they're beholden at the debt to these corporations. And so that's one of the major concerns about these globalization stuff. Not to mention what happens when you have an American company drilling oil in an African country. The profits of that extraction go to Americans, even though those resources belong to, well, originate with that country. And so there's some disparity of wealth and income based on who gets what from those activities. Also, particularly with China, locally developed social media, because China does not allow Facebook. They have Weibo, which is their own version, basically, of a Facebook, and they have their own Google type app through Google, but it's called, I think it's like the Chinese, the Great Firewall of China, a way to prevent certain information from reaching Chinese people regarding either their country or bad news, stuff like that. So there we go, resistance to globalization. And then finally, institutions developing a globalized world. So who produces these? Particularly the UN. The UN is trying to make the world better for everyone. Their military projects are not always that great, or successful, sorry. Their presence might do some, but they haven't been known to be super effective when it comes to UN soldiers. However, as more membership, there's more international observation of polling and voting. You have UNESCO, United Nations, their World Heritage Sites. They say basically these things are so important, they're important for humanity. And if you look, yay, Virginia, we got Monticello. But those are all major world sites. And you notice for the United States, a lot of them are actually just like, you know, natural features, even though a lot of the places, particularly in New Mexico and Colorado, have ancient origins of humans in there too. And UNICEF, United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund. And that's for basically funds to help kids go to school or get the necessary vaccinations, that kind of stuff. So their idea is to maintain world peace, but also keep people integrated. Just like our own societies, if countries are integrated with each other, there's less reason for war. There's a concept called the democratic peace. 2 countries that are democracies have never gone to war with one another. And there's another one now, and it's called the HP peace, which is any country that is involved in the Hewlett-Packard production of their printers and computers and supply chain has never gone to war with one another. And one of the good examples of this, of how the economy is now changing politics, is in early 2000s, Pakistan and India were vying to go back to a major war, and they both were putting pressure on one another to do stuff. Well, some of the major Indian corporations were getting kind of worried, and then the United States State Department put a travel advisory on both countries, which froze funds going to those countries. It also limited travel to these countries, and so they started hurting economically. And so these businesses started going to the governments and saying, y'all gotta chill, you gotta back off, stop. This is costing us money. I don't care what your squabbling is, just stop. And both India and Pakistan kind of like cooled down and backed off because they couldn't afford all of those economic hits. And so as we globally integrate, there is a bigger push for peace because peace is more profitable. War is destructive. We got to worry about that. So that is our future. And that's the end of all of these notes. And you are done for the year in terms of new content. So congrats and good luck.
I always like to end on a positive note, so here is a rousing, uplifting song which is guaranteed to cheer you up. When you attend a funeral, it is sad to think that sooner or later those you love will do the same for you. And you may have thought it tragic, not to mention other adjectives, to think of all the weeping they will do. But don't you worry, no more ashes, no more sackcloth, and an armband made of black cloth will someday nevermore adorn a sleeve. For if the bomb that drops on you gets your friends and neighbors too, there'll be nobody left behind to grieve, and we will all go together when we go. What a comforting fact that is to know. Universal bereavement, an inspiring achievement. Yes, we all will go together when we go. We will all go together when we go, all suffused with an incandescent glow. No one will have the endurance to collect on his insurance. Lloyd's of London will be loaded when they go. We will all fry together when we fry. We'll be French fried potatoes by and by. There will be no more misery when the world is our rotisserie. Yes, we all will fry together when we fry. We will all bake together when we bake. There'll be nobody present at the wake. With complete participation in that grand incineration, nearly 3 billion hunks of well-done steak. We will all char together when we char, and let there be no moaning of the bar. Just sing out a Te Deum when you see that ICBM, and the party will be come as you are. We will all burn together when we burn. There'll be no need to stand and wait your turn. When it's time for the fallout and St. Peter calls us all out, we'll just drop our agendas and adjourn. We will all go together when we go, every Hottentot and every Eskimo. When the air becomes Uranus, we will all go simultaneous. Yes, we all will go together when we all go together. Yes, we all will go together when we go.